Good morning, and thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Chikodi Obiji. I'm a senior analyst with the Capital Market and Advisory team at United Capital PLC, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Please allow me to give a brief overview of United Capital PLC and what we're all about. That will also give time for all the other participants to join the meeting. Essentially, we are an investment banking and financial services group with businesses cutting across asset management, securities trading, trusteeship, consumer finance, and wealth management. We have a significant presence throughout Africa with offices spread across Ghana and Nigeria. In Nigeria, we have operating offices across the 6 geopolitical zones with our headquarters in Lagos. It's also worth noting that this webinar is being hosted by our Western Nigerian team, which sits in the Ibadan office. So thank you, team, for great initiative. United Capital PLC is one of the top investment banking firms in Nigeria. It's currently the only investment banking firm listed on the Nigerian exchange. Our group total assets is currently over 800 billion. We also have assets under management of in excess of 600 billion. Our fund manager, which is our asset management business, is currently the top, one of the top 3 asset management firms in Nigeria. We've received several accolades and recognitions over the years. We were also recently recognized as one of Africa's fastest growing companies by the Financial Times for the 2nd consecutive year. Okay, that being said, I think we can go over some housekeeping rules. Please note that this call is being recorded, and also note that all participants are in listen mode only. Should you have questions or you have comments, please share those comments or questions via the Q&A section or chat box just at the bottom of your screen. There's going to be a Q&A segment after the session where all questions and comments will be treated accordingly. Thank you. So I think it's now time for us to start our discussion officially. Today's topic would be on alternative financing opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises operating in Nigeria. When I say small and medium-sized enterprises, also refer to them as SMEs operating in Nigeria. So I'll do a quick introduction of our speakers for today. For today, we have 2 speakers. They'll be joined from their wealth of experience to provide you with information on alternative financing opportunities available for SMEs and how to determine and access the right one for your business. Our first speaker is Tobechi Nwosu, who leads the Structured Trade Finance team at United Capital PLC. Tobechi has over 15 years of experience in core banking, international trade and finance, and investment banking. He currently holds a Certificate of Finance in International Trade, COFT, from the University of Malta. He is also a member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers Nigeria, CIBN, to which he's an expert and an authority in the investment banking industry and the financial services sector in Nigeria. Thank you, Tobechi. We also have our second speaker is Olakale Lipede. Olakale is also a well-experienced expert in the investment banking industry. He's currently a senior analyst with the Structured Trade Finance team at United Capital PLC. He has over 6 years of experience in investment banking, asset management, and the overall financial services. He holds a master's degree in international business and management from the University of Manchester. He's also an alumnus of Harvard Business School Alternative Investment Program. So we have 2 experts here to educate us on the opportunities and the alternative sources of financing available to SMEs. Tobechi and Kale, how are you doing today?
We are doing well. Thank you so much, Chikodi, for that wonderful introduction, and good morning to our amiable participants. We look forward to having a fruitful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Chikodi. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning to everyone. Looking to have a great session.
Okay, great. So let's dive right into today's discussion. Like I had mentioned, our topic is basically talking about alternative sources of funding or alternative financing opportunities for SMEs in Nigeria. So Tobechi, could you please give an overview of SMEs in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you, Chikodi, for that question. So as the name connotes, SMEs are small and medium enterprises in Nigeria. So these are the most important industries you can think of in Nigeria because they are the major economic drivers across board. So by definition, SMEs are companies or businesses that have staff strength between 1 to 250 employees. And in Nigeria today, they are classified into 3 major segments. You have the micro, the small, and the medium. So for the micros, their staff strength is between 1 to 9 employees. For the small, it's between 10 to 49 employees. And while the medium is between 50 to 249. So by way of information from National Bureau of Statistics, SMEs in Nigeria have contributed about 48% to our national GDP in the last 5 years. So what does it tell you? It tells you how major, how key this set of companies are to the economic development and sustainability of every nation. But in Nigeria today, there's a major challenge for the SMEs, which is funding gap. So they don't have access to funding. They have businesses in diversified areas, the agro-allied, the fintech, manufacturing, and what have you. But the real problem is access to finance. And traditionally, for few of them that have access, what comes to mind is go to the banks to get some form of facilities. But today, we are here to spread the good news that there are other sources, there are other alternatives. It's not just going to the banks alone. You can actually access funding for your working capital. You can access funding to expand your businesses, move them from ground zero to up the roof there. So that's why we're here, and I believe we'll do justice to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tobechi. Well said. Like Tobechi has mentioned, if you have a business or you have a family member or you have a friend or colleague that operates a business with a staff strength of between 1 to 249, you know that you fall under this category, all right? And would definitely be providing you more insights on how you're able to fund the financing gap in those businesses. So Tobechi, could you elaborate on the alternative financing opportunities available to SMEs and how they are different from the traditional funding sources that they are currently used to?
Okay, thanks for that question again, Chikodi. So for alternative funding sources, so for the first timers, there's what we call private notes. So private notes are short-term instruments that we can structure to enable the SMEs access some kind of funding between 90 days to about 1 year, that's 365 days. So there are processes and there are requirements for them to get these private notes. So first and first, you must have been in business between 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you know, for you to have access to this private notes. So like I said earlier, traditionally, what comes to mind is go to the bank, get an overdraft or import overdraft for your businesses. But we could structure a private note for you here between 90 days to 365 days. And in terms of pricing, in terms of cost, so it's actually more cost effective when you compare to the lending rates from the commercial banks today. So we are not here to maybe compete with the banks, but it's more like a complementary service So over the course of this webinar, we'll throw more light on how you can access the private note. So another one is also commercial papers. So a lot of SMEs have actually utilized this capital market instrument to raise debt to move their businesses from ground zero to something way above where they were before. So the good thing with commercial papers is that it's regulated by FMDQ. So there are also procedures and there are requirements as well. There are also other parties that will need to involve. So the good thing here is largely unsecured. So your business will have to go through a rating process. So there are 3 rating agencies in Nigeria. So any one of them that rates you and you have an investment grade rating, that rating process substitutes the collateral that you'll be asked to get from the traditional banks when you want to access any form of funding. So that's the major difference between traditional lending and coming to lend from the capital market. We also have private equity as a source as well. So the major issue with most SMEs, most of them fall into the category of what we can call startups. Maybe they're just starting, they have a wonderful idea, a beautiful concept, but no money, and no institution is willing to even give them facility because they don't have what it takes to access this funding from them. But we have a relationship with a lot of private equity firms who have interests in diverse areas. So the fintechs, manufacturing, the IT, and all that. So if you're an SME and you fall into these buckets, we can actually help you to link you up with these private equity firms who will not just bring money to take the company up, they also bring their expertise for a number of years. They'll be with you. And once you make it, they can exit by taking their own profit, then you can continue to run from there. Then we also have what we call a private bond. So a private bond is, so for SME, like I said earlier, you have the micro, you have the small, and you have the medium. So some SMEs in a little space of time, they grew so big. So from there, they move to what we call emerging corporates. So when you get to that point, you have need to import equipment, you have need to expand your business. So a short-term financing might not be okay for you. So we can do something longer than that. So we can do a 3 to 5 year funding to enable you to meet that expansion project to take the business to the other level. So that's what a private bond can do for you. So we've listed like 4. So we have the private notes, you have the CPs, that's the commercial papers, you have the private equity for the startups, and you also have the private bond. So these are the 4 basic alternative sources of raising financing for the SMEs, apart from the traditional lending from the banks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobechi. Well said. Just a reminder on the Q&A tab, just at the bottom of your screen, either the Q&A tab or the chat box. Send in questions while we're having our speakers share more light on the alternative financing options available for your businesses. Okay, Tobechi, if you could elaborate on the funding range, right, in terms of size that SMEs are able to access, and also the tenor. You had mentioned 4 options. You mentioned private notes, commercial paper, private equity, and private bond, right? What are the modalities around those options? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of size for the options, so I mean, we have, like I said, so the micro, the small, and the medium SME. So we can actually raise funding between 100 million to about 5 billion, depending on the type of source we want to use. But for the first timers, we usually advise that to start from a private note. Then after when you do private notes for a year or thereabout, then you can do something more structured. You can move to something that is more regulated, as a commercial paper. Then from there, you can advance to do a private bond when you want to meet up with your capex. So, but for the PE, more like startups. So definitely will help you to link you up with the PE firms that can come into the company, bring money, also bring their expertise in taking the companies to the next level. But apart from arranging these funds or helping you to get this funding, we also have high expertise in trade as it were, just stemming from the introduction you made earlier. So we've assisted a lot of SMEs to grow to something massive at the moment. So we have lots of testimonials in different sectors: agro-allied, fintech, manufacturing, and what have you. So that's the beauty of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tobechi. So Tobechi, like Tobechi mentioned, you can get capital funding of as low as 500 million or 100 million, and as high as 5 billion. 5 billion not being the cap, it can be in excess of 5 billion, and you're able to access funding via any of these alternative funding sources. Okay, so I'll move on to Kale. Kale, could you give us a base level of the information that is required by SMEs to be able to access funding via the options that Tobechi had mentioned?
Thank you, Chikodi, and good morning again to the attendees. So in terms of the documentation, just to recap the options that Tobechi mentioned, we have the commercial papers, the private notations, the private bond issuance. I also mentioned the private equity. In terms of these options, there's some information that every SME needs to ensure that they obtain, starting with your corporate information. Similar to any entity that is looking to open up an account with a bank, you need to present them with your certificate of incorporation, your MEMAT, your articles, your status report. Those are all information that lets them know the promoters of the business. In the same vein, you would also need to do a check on the directors of the company. So we need the IDs of the director just so that we know the ultimate beneficiary. Other documents that will be required are your financial statements. We typically request for 3 to 5 years so that we have an opportunity to assess the business. And we also have a fiduciary responsibility to investors. And we have to ensure that the instruments that we're putting in front of them or the SMEs that we're putting in front of them are bankable. And we can only derive that information from your financial statements. In Tobechi's earlier response, he alluded to a credit rating report, which is very necessary for backing on any type of transaction from an SME standpoint. What the credit rating report does for you is that it gives a third-party opinion on how the business is being assessed and whether or not it qualifies to be an investment grade SME or not. In this document, we're assessing your corporate governance framework, your businesses, your revenue lines, your debt obligations, and your ability to repay. The corporate governance is very important because ultimately, if investors can identify with the framework that the company has put in place, there's more assurance that the ability to repay is also instilled in the fundamentals of the business. But something you should note about the credit rating report, we had mentioned investment grade rating. So the way credit rating report works, you have an A, B, C, D rating. Anything above a BBB rating is considered investment grade. However, if your SMEs or your respective businesses do not get this BBB rating, United Capital is also equipped to work with the entity to improve any area of their business to ensure that they meet this investment grade rating. And I'm sure Tobechi will also make mention to that as well during the session in terms of the companies we have worked with. So what we typically do in that situation is like from either your corporate governance framework or where your financials are, or the position of your financials, we work with the companies to address all these areas of concern and ensure that they are ripe enough to be put in front of investors. And I think finally, we would also need the business profile of the business, stating more information about the business, what the repayment plan is if they indeed get this funding from the investors, and how this capital they intend to raise sets out to impact their business in the long run. So those are the baseline requirements that will be required for SMEs to access this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Kale. Just to recap what Kale had mentioned, You need your corporate documents, that's your certificate of incorporation, your article of association and memorandum. You also need your historical financials. If you've been in operation for over 5 years, we need a minimum of 5 years. If it's less than 5 years, a minimum of 3 years will suffice. We'll also help you and hold you through the credit rating process that Kale and Tobechi had mentioned. And we'll also need to assess your corporate profile, your strategy documents, and essentially your corporate governance documentation, right, and the structure that is currently in place for your business. Okay, Olakale, could you just go over the pool of investors, right, that would be engaging to provide funding via the private note, commercial paper, private bond, and private placement, private equity instruments? Thank you.
Thank you, Chikodi. And I think just before I jump into that, there was one other document that it's important to mention as one of the documents, and that's the security structure for every SME. So, given that majority of the SMEs that we are approaching are usually first-time issuers in this regard, it's also important that they have security such as maybe a bank guarantee or a liquidity support facility. We also take all asset debentures and legal mortgages. But as we advise these entities on their respective transaction, we'll also be able to shed more light on which particular security structure best their situation. So in terms of the investors that subscribe to this instrument, we have asset managers, which United Capital also plays that role. We have your pension fund administrators, insurance companies, trustees, securities businesses, and other corporate entities. By other corporate entities, we mean your respective cooperatives from different institutions and professional organizations, and just any business that looks to enhance their income line. So these are the guys that subscribe to this instrument. But for the pension fund, you would require 2 rating reports to be able to approach a pension fund as is in line with their PENCOM guidelines. So I think that's very important for the SMEs to know. But as we go along, when we typically start, you see a lot of interest with asset managers, trustees, and as you show track record, then you start to get the interest of pension funds and other investors.
Okay, thank you very much, Kale. Like Kale rightly mentioned, one of the documentation will be your security structure. However, I don't want all of us to get tensed up, because when you speak on security, some businesses might not be buoyant in terms of assets. You're still able to access the capital markets with or without security. However, it's easier when you have a security structure. Another advantage of working with United Capital is that we have a robust group, right? Where you're not able to get security, we have our trustees business that were able to put on the transaction, and they're able to ensure that the interest of the investors are put ahead or are covered in terms of funding and financing. So where you're not able to provide all asset debenture or any of the securities that Kale had mentioned, the bank guarantee or the liquidity support facility, and you're very heavy in terms of your cash flow, we're able to structure our trustees business to oversee the cash flow and the repayment to investors. Likewise, speaking to the variety of investors that would be providing funding opportunities to your businesses, this includes our asset management. The asset management businesses across Nigeria. Thankfully, United Capital has a buoyant fund management business. We are currently number 3 in Nigeria. Our fund under management is in excess of 600 billion. You also have trustees business. Our trustees business is the foremost trustees business in Nigeria. You also have securities businesses. You have other investors that are able to key in banks, pension funds, like Kale had mentioned, for pension, you need two credit rating reports, and you also need to have a PENCOM compliance certificate, as at the year you'll be issuing any of the products. Okay, so I think before we move on to the question and answer segment, right, just to remind participants that you're able to send in questions and comments via the chat box or the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. So please send in those questions because we'll be addressing those questions shortly. Tobechi, could you give a couple of testimonials, right? It's very easy for us to say, oh, we're able to raise capital, we're able to raise funding, right? Could you give a couple of testimonials just to speak to our capacity, right, as an investment banking firm that is able to sort of bridge the funding or the financing gap in the SME space?
Okay, thank you so much, Chikodi, for that question. Okay, yeah, so we'll have lots of testimonials using these alternative financing sources for the SMEs. So I will start from the first one. So we have a client called John Vance Industries Limited. So John Vance is the manufacturer. They are into cocoa processing. So they have a plant in Akure. So we've been with them for the past 2 years. So we've raised the excess of about 20 billion since inception. And we've taken the company from a very low level to a higher level, to the extent that John Vance, as of today, is #1 largest exporter of cocoa semi-finished products in Nigeria today. So they have when we started with them, they just acquired a plant from a big multinational company. Currently, they also acquired another one at Iloloji. So they have 2 plants. One is a 15,000 metric ton capacity. The other one is about 30,000 metric ton capacity. So what they do is they buy cocoa bean, they move it to their factory, they produce cocoa powder, cocoa liquor, and cocoa butter. These products are being exported to Europe and Asia, and they earn lots of foreign exchange. So that one makes them big. They are #1 in Nigeria today, and we are happy that we're part of that success story. When they started, they didn't have that funding, but we were there for them. So just like my colleague Chikodi said, we don't just arrange funding, we also put our skin in the game, because I mean, we have a group of companies that make things happen. Our asset management is the top 3 in Nigeria. Our security is our trustee is the oldest in Nigeria as of today. We have other businesses too doing very well with heavy balance sheets. So they support the funding, so long as the transaction is bankable enough and the structure is watertight. So we also have another company, Nivea Limited. So Nivea is a commodity trading company. So they are into agro commodities, ginger and hibiscus. So we've been with them for the past 2 years. We've also raised over 20 billion for this company. When we started with Nivea, their profit was less than 50 million. But as of today, they are making billions by way of profits. So you can see what funding can do to an SME. I'm sure most of the participants here, you have the expertise, you have the ideas, you even have the offtake, you have the contracts. The difference between you and these names I mentioned now is just funding. And that's why we are here, to bridge that funding gap. So just to add again, Nivea also was mentioned. Nivea was the 18th fastest growing company by Financial Times 2023. The records is a public document. You can check it out. Nivea Limited. So we are happy that we are part of their success story. And today the company they're even growing above SMEs now, because they are entering the emerging market. So from there, we move them to our capital markets, where they can now do things like corporate bond, private bond, which is also another segment of the business we do here in investment banking. We also did some pre-import financing for Nesit Nigeria Limited. So Nesit is the #1 importer of base oil in Nigeria. These are statistics, you can verify them. We're not just giving these data for nothing, they are public documents. So we're able to raise this financing to meet their import needs. So they supply most of all the major multinational companies and the oil majors in Nigeria with that product called base oil. So it's also what we have done. Then we did something for one of the leading fintechs in Nigeria as well, Capital Sage Technologies. So Capital Sage is one of the leading fintechs in Nigeria today. We started from a private note, we moved to commercial papers. Now the guy is no longer an SME; he's now an emerging corporate. So they are looking forward to do some private bond and corporate bond as well. We've also raised over 15 billion for Capital Sage in the last 18 months to 2 years, using the same alternative financing sources we are preaching here. So, I mean, the testimonials are a whole lot. So, in order not to bore us, I don't want to continue to mention them. If you give me the next 30 minutes, I can give you the names will continue to go. But let me just pause here for now. Thank you, Chikodi, for those wonderful questions.
Thank you very much, Tobechi. Well said. Tobechi has mentioned that we've helped a lot of SMEs, and we're still helping a lot of SMEs and assisting them grow their capital and bridge their funding gap. One of those companies would include Fair Money. We raised about 2.5 billion under its registered CP program recently. You have Fast Credits, 2.8 billion. You have Atlas Supermarket and Stores, 600 million. You have Capital Sage, like Tobechi mentioned. You have Nivea, you have Skymark, Skymark Partners Limited, and you have other companies that we've been able to assist for the past couple of years. So this just speaks to our coverage. We are not focused on a specific sector. We cut across various sectors and industries, which include financial services, specifically fintech, agribusiness, healthcare, transportation, oil and gas, power. So regardless or irrespective of the industry or sector in which you operate, we're very confident that we're able to support your business meet its financial targets and goal. So I think we can move to the Q&A segment of the webinar. So I'll be taking questions now. I'll read out those questions, and I'll call on either Tobechi or Olakale to provide clarity or provide more insights on the questions. First question will be from Mr. Babatunde Bewesa. So his question is, must a startup have audited financial statements? So over to Tobechi. Tobechi, could you confirm that?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So just like the name suggests, startup, I mean, you need not to have a startup. There's no way a startup will have audited financial. So by startup will mean companies that are just starting. So the basic thing a startup needs to have is a very robust business plan that can show that there are potentials in this company. That's just what the equity investor wants to see. They want to see, if I put my money here in the next 2-3 years, can we break even? Is this company going to be a going concern? So once we're able to demonstrate that, then we can get those PE firms to put in their money. Most of them will even bring expertise to run the business with you for maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Then after which, once you make money, they can take their own share of the profit, exit, then you continue to run your business. So just to answer your question straightforward, you need not to have audited financials as a startup. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tobechi. Okay, the next question would be from Ibrahim Aliyu. His question is, can you explain the modalities for the private notes? Okay, so I think, Kale, you can provide insights on this question.
Okay, so thank you for the question. Modalities on private notes. So as Tobechi mentioned, the way private note typically works is we structure an instrument for an entity looking to raise capital. For the private note in particular, we're either looking to fund a working capital solution, or depending on the stage of which the business is looking at, if they're looking to also expand. Those are the things that we take into consideration. But the idea around it is that it's an instrument that is fully assessed and fully issued by the United Capital team in this situation without having any, with having flexibilities from the regulator. So it's not regulated by any agency. And we take that into consideration when putting this instrument in front of investors. It is ideally faster compared to a commercial paper issuance. But one of the challenges that we would face is that the investor base will be limited because of the regulatory element. So, I had mentioned all the classes of investors that subscribe to this instrument. What you find in instances of private notes is that say a pension fund might not subscribe, depending on how insurance companies feel, they might not subscribe to this instrument. So it's just limited to certain investor base, and that obviously that would play a role in determining the amount that you're looking to raise in this situation. I know my colleagues have mentioned that for this instrument we raise anywhere from 100 million to 5 billion, but that is on the progressional basis, and after the business has shown track record that they can repay the obligations that they have taken. So that's typically how the private note works. But obviously we have to take into consideration the baseline documents that we mentioned, because we would also require that when issuing one for the SMEs.
Okay, thank you very much, Kale. We have another question from Mr. Babatunde Gbewesa. His question is, the credit ratings report is it for the directors of the business or for the business itself? Olakale, could you provide clarity on that?
Thank you, Chikodi. Thanks for that question. So the credit rating report is for the entity itself. So all it covers is the overview of the business that is being reviewed, what their corporate governance is like, from the board of directors to the risk management framework, their performance, and if they've taken any previous obligations and how they were able to meet those obligations. That's all your credit rating report is stating. It's allowing investors look at that entity from another lens, and in this regard, from the credit agency's lens, in terms of how the company has performed and met existing obligations.
Okay, thank you very much, Kale. So Kale has answered that. Credit rating is particularly for the business. However, other modalities will be assessed, which include the corporate governance, which is also tied to the directors of the business. Thank you. So we have a question from Toby. Toby is asking if the recording would be shared with the participants. Definitely, after the session, communication will go out to all the participants with the recording. So you're able to share with family and friends as well. Thank you. So we have another question from Adetola Adeyemi. What options are available for a new startup needing low capital for operating expenses, say 5 to 10 million? All we have is bank statement of our operations for 7 months. So this is an interesting question. So I'll hand over to Tobechi to answer that.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Chikodi, for that question. So the alternative financing sources you mentioned here, I think the limit to set is about around 100 million. But the good thing with this question is that we belong to a group. And in the course of this presentation and your introduction by the moderator, Chikodi, you had mentioned that we have a consumer finance business. So also just to tell the participants that this business have been upscaled recently. United Capital have gotten a license from CBN to operate a microfinance bank. So it's now United Capital Microfinance Bank. So I'm sure this category of funding will be channeled to our microfinance bank to sort you guys out. So you are covered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobechi. You've heard it from Tobechi. We have a microfinance banking team that is able to provide consumer financing to you. The size that you had indicated, 5 to 10 million, definitely could be provided to you once you satisfy all the criteria required by the team. So we'll move on to another question from Sochi Ekechi. Her question is, are there certain sectors you don't offer financing to, or are these options open to all sectors? I think we've mentioned that it's open to all, but I'll allow Kale to just throw more light on that.
Thank you, Chikodi. Like you rightly said, we offer these opportunities to all the sectors. It's important to know that as the business builds their relationship with United Capital, we assess you on the transaction by transaction basis. You might meet us in, say, 2023 with a particular sector. Depending on how the market reacts to that, we might tell you whether it's a go or no go. But by 2024, it might be a good time for them to come into the market again. So it's just pretty much us hand-holding every business through this journey and providing these insights for them to approach this capital. But just to reiterate, we provide the services across all sectors.
Thank you very much, Kale. We have a question from Luis Acoveso. His question is, what is the prospect of an agribusiness, precisely a farm, being able to raise capital via these means? Over to you, Tobechi.
Okay, thank you so much, Louis, for your question. So, I mean, we are open to all sectors, like my colleague Kale had said earlier. So, even currently, we've raised funding for the agribusinesses. So, I mean, farm should not be an exception to that. So, we are open to that. So, it's possible. So, let's see what you have, and we'll find a way to provide. And you know, again, too, for primary production, just like you mentioned now, farms, I mean, there are entities of the federal government that we also partner with. So NESAL is one of them. NESAL is like a microfinance bank of the CBN with focus on primary production activities. So even when you don't have collateral security, I'm sure NESAL will give you up to 50 to 70% of what they call a risk-based guarantee to enable you get some kind of financing. So we've done transactions of that nature where NESAL provided a guarantee for the primary production farmers and all that. So it's something we can work with you on. So you also cover that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobechi. Okay, we have a question from Olutayo Olugbade. His question is, good morning. Thank you for this beautiful presentation. Please, how can a hospital of about 17 years practice that is planning to expand its operations, in brackets, setting up IUCs, dialysis centers in an area that has none in a 30 kilometers radius, what are the requirements? So I think I'll hand over to Kale.
Okay, thank you, Chikodi, for that question. Can you just say the question again, please? I know you had mentioned that the hospital, as a hospital business for over 17 years, but can you just
Yeah, so I think essentially what Olutayo wants to find out is what are the requirements for her to be able to expand her hospital that has been in operation for 17 years. I think one of the expansion plans is to have IUCs set up and dialysis centers set up in areas that areas that are not currently being covered or don't really have access to healthcare at the moment.
Understood. Thanks, Chikodi. So I'll say that the first step is, I know that in the webinar we have shared our email address. I think step one is try and get in contact with us immediately. Hospital is healthcare is very important. It's a sector that we pay close attention to, and it's very important to what we're speaking to. So it's good to assess what the business has done and to know how we can offer certain solutions to what they are looking to do. But in line with the webinar we discussed today, just giving the regular criteria as we had mentioned, from your corporate documents to the financials of the business, just ensuring that all documentations are in line for any investor to take a stab at. But more importantly, just for us to understand the performance in particular, to be able to advise on which of these instruments, would be ideal to the business. Because a key thing that you had mentioned was that you had been in existence for 17 years, and that is no small feat. So it's important for us to assess your performance and then advise on which of the options that my colleague Tobechi mentioned will be beneficial to you. So I'll invite you to send us an email so that we can review some of these documentations with you and be in a position to advise you on the options open to you in this regard.
Okay, thank you very much, Olakale. I also like to mention that United Capital PLC has an infrastructure fund team that has focus across various sectors, which include healthcare. So another vehicle would be to link you up with the infrastructure team. They'll be able to access your business and access the expansion plans and guide you on the next steps to achieve those goals and objectives. So thank you, Tayo, for that question. So I'll be reading another question from Ifelayo Ayeni. What is the interest rate for accessing a loan of 5 million? I will also appreciate a replay link for this webinar in my box for proper understanding of this session. Okay, so I'll be taking this. So we have, I think Ali had mentioned that we have a consumer finance team under the microfinance bank business, right? We can't give you categorically a specific rate, but however, you should be able to access loan of 5 million via our consumer finance team. After the webinar, I'll be sharing contact details that you can reach us via, and we should be able to attend to your need once you send in your requests. Yes, definitely a link for this webinar will be shared to all the participants after the session, and you can share same with your family members, family and friends, so they can key into this program. So we have a question from an anonymous attendee. The question is, does United Capital have a venture capital business or team? So Tobechi, do you mind taking that?
Okay, yes, yeah. Thank you so much, Chikodi, for that. So, one of the sources we mentioned was private equity. So under private equity, you have the PE firms, you have venture capitalists, you also have what we call angel investors. So we have some of the PE firms that we work with, so we can arrange that. We can also make it happen. So, but we as United Capital, we don't have any form of venture capital, but because we also have an advisory team in our investment banking business. So this is also one of the core services they offer. So they have some kind of pool of a PE firm. Of course, I know you have lots of venture capitalists are in there. So if you reach us, just keep listening to the webinar. The moderator will announce how you can reach also further inquiries and others. So we can link you up with the advisory team, and I'm sure they will find a way to get one or two venture capitalists that can support your business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tobechi. Adilayo has a question, and the question goes, my business deals with FMCG distribution and sub-distributorship. How can we raise funds? This is a very good question because we have a client that operates in the FMCG distribution subsector or industry, at least supermarket and stores. You can check that, it's online. Sometime in January, I think January, February this year, we're able to raise about 600 million via its registered CP program with FMDQ. So definitely we should be able to arrange your documentation and handhold you through the fundraising process for you to be able to raise the necessary funding to expand your FMCG distribution and sub-distribution business. So we have another question We have another question from Toby. The question goes, considering that credit rating is a requirement, how does this affect organizations that have basically bootstrapped and are currently looking to expand? Olakale, do you mind taking this question?
Thank you, Chikodi. That's a good question. So just to reiterate, the credit rating report basically assesses the business and looks into like their historical performance and what, like mentioned, the corporate governance and risk management framework is like. So if a business wants to expand and they're looking to raise long-term capital, those are some of the things that the investors would take into consideration. Because in the credit rating report, it's also documented that outside of the business being run properly with efficient management and good framework, they also have the ability to repay. So what that does to the investor assessing it is inspires confidence. And also, we had mentioned that the agencies give a rating. If your business happens to fall within the investment grade rating, then it's beneficial to you, and it just essentially means that you can raise the capital that is required to expand your business. But in the event that it's below the investment grade rating, then United Capital will play that role in advising you as to how you can achieve these goals or what needs to be improved so that you get that investment grade rating. But ultimately, the credit rating report is really to make a decision for the investors and for us to play that fiduciary responsibility that I had mentioned for these investors, knowing that we had dotted our I's and crossed our T's as pertains to the instrument.
Thank you very much, Olakale. That's very sound. So we'll be taking the last question from Yemi Akinyode. Aside from financing, will United Capital help improve the structure of a business for better profitability? Definitely. So we have our advisory team at United Capital PLC. So the advisory team essentially is able to review your business, current operations, and essentially help you structure or restructure your business for extensive growth and expansion in the coming years. So where there's need for restructuring in terms of corporate governance, United Capital is able to advise you on that. In terms of business operation, in terms of segments of your business that you need to let go of or that you need to take on, United Capital is able to provide those advisory services to your businesses, right? Another interesting thing about our group is that we have a robust research team. Our research reports are one of the top in Nigeria as a whole. We have an extensive coverage across Nigeria and various sectors in Nigeria. So the research team is also able to provide support to the advisory team to ensure that the advice that the team is able to provide to your businesses are enough, or will I say are well robust for your expansion and your essential growth and profitability. So I think we can end the Q&A segment now. I know we've not been able to take all the questions, but rest assured that we would address those questions via the communication that will go out after the webinar. So I want to say a big thank you to the guests, the speakers. I want to thank you all for all your participation and for taking out time today. Today is a weekend. Today is a Saturday. I know that it took a lot for you to dial into this session. I want to say a big thank you. However, if you have questions, if you have comments, for those of us that have businesses that we want to bring under the wing of United Capital, please send your email to ibadanoffice@unitedcapitalplcgroup.com. I'll take that again. Please send an email to ibadanoffice@unitedcapitalplcgroup.com. So I'll leave the floor open for Tobechi to give us a closing remark before we end the session.
Okay, thank you, Chikodi, for wonderful moderation while the webinar lasted. And I also wish to use this medium to thank the Western region of United Capital team, whose office is in Ibadan, for anchoring this program. And I know we also have the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria, SMEDAN. In this group, I thank you for your participation. I also thank the National Association of Small Scale Industrialists, NASI, who is also present here. We are happy to have you. So in my final comments, I will advise the SMEs, you've heard it all. United Capital is big. We have balance sheet size in excess of 800 billion. This can match most tier 2 banks in Nigeria today. We have other businesses with heavy balance sheets. We don't just arrange funds. We also advise you to grow your business to the next level. We also put our skin in the game. We have funded lots of SMEs. We have made them grow from nothing to something. So we are the go-to guy. We are your investment banking choice, the intelligent choice. Come to us and we'll make sure we'll turn your business around. Thank you for listening to us and do enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.
Okay, thank you. Please hold on before you exit the webinar. Just a quick AOB. Following this session, an interest declaration form will be sent via email. Please fill the form. If you are interested in our services, right, just fill the form and send back to us. You should have another. We should have another session coming very soon. That will be communicated to all the participants on the call. If you have questions or inquiries, please send an email to ibadanoffice@unitedcapitalplcgroup.com. I'll take that again. If you have any questions, comments, if you want us to start the fundraising process with your team, your businesses, please send an email to ibadanoffice@unitedcapitalplcgroup.com. A recording of the webinar will be sent to you shortly after the session. Please feel free to share to your family and friends and colleagues that have SMEs or have businesses that fall into this category. We have now come to the end of the session for today. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at subsequent events. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.